You read my mind. So before we leave the topic that we were talking about a bit before class, two things. First of all, religion is like the bezel, the setting of a jewel. Deep mysticism is the jewel. Deep mysticism does not occur anywhere in the world outside of its religious setting. If someone tries to do that within a matter of hundreds of years, it becomes a religion. There are lots of reasons for this. And Hinduism also is that. There is all the various ritualistic practices that we do as Hindus. That's not the Advaita Vedanta. That's the jewel in the setting. In Buddhism, there are more Buddhists meditating in the US than there are in Japan or China or Southeast Asia. The vast majority of Buddhists are ritualistic. Christianity the same way. I suspect there's deep mysticism in Carmelite monasteries and convents. There's certainly been an attempt to recover the contemplative prayer tradition within Christianity. Vast majority of Christians, oh, meditation, that's Satan, you know. So there's always this exoteric religious practice, usually based in belief. Then there's the esoteric, the deep mystic wisdom. Now, when I first met Swamiji, we would have what he would call the Jnana Yajnas, which literally means a sacrifice to knowledge. But we used to call them camps. And there would be cultural events at the camps. So the Gujaratis would do their thing, and the Malayalis would do their things, and the Marathis would do their thing. Then everybody else who was non-Indian was all just lumped together. You're Australian or French or from the US or wherever. I mean, it was very kind of funny. So I sang at one of these camps. I sang Panis Angelicus, which is an old Catholic hymn about Eucharist. And he says, "Are you in the profession?" And I went, he looks at me and he says, "Don't become a Hindu. Take what you learn from this tradition and let it inform your Christianity." Very, very wise advice. So I have had a foot in both worlds ever since. And I jokingly say that Swamiji made a Catholic out of me. Because within that Catholic tradition, there are those teachings of deep mysticism. So for you, Sophia, you don't need to put aside the religion that you were raised with. First of all, it's going to be really hard because that's where your emotional context is going to be. Does that make any sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking of putting it aside because I don't see any reason to choose.
Exactly. So set aside all the God stuff in Hinduism and focus on this mystic technology. Then you may have a journey similar to mine, Once I began to find this live wire, that took me back to Christian mystics. And I saw in the Hesychast movement in Eastern Orthodoxy, there's a Christian yoga. I found mystics like Meister Eckhart and the Cloud of Unknowing, and people you haven't even heard of, like Marguerite of Porret. These are Christian non-dualists, but they're there within Islam as well. And I can, if I can't guide you, is your mother tongue Arabic?
Urdu.
Urdu. I don't know. Can you read Arabic though?
Yeah.
Okay. I think Rumi wrote in Persian.
You're right.
Yeah.
You wrote in
But I think Hafiz wrote in Arabic. But I could be wrong. I can't remember what language Ibn Arabi wrote in. He's not quite as successful. But you might find it of value because it warms the heart. It will help the devotional part of your spiritual journey, which we all need to have. So is this useful?
Yeah, definitely. Jim, what do you mean again by non-dualist?
The exoteric teaching within Islam, within Christianity, within Judaism is the only thing you need to know about God is you're not it. God is transcendental other. And what is the best posture for the individual? What does Islam mean? The word in Arabic.
I don't know what it means.
Surrender.
Okay.
Surrender. That's why, what's the Muslim posture of prayer?
Bowing down.
Yes, it's a physical posture of humility and surrender. That's why we have the namaskar within Hinduism. It's exactly the same thing. Jews pray standing up. Christians do both. They pray standing up and they pray kneeling. Protestants, not so much. They don't kneel. Catholics. But anyway, the essence of those dualistic traditions, that's the outer teaching, is turn your will and your life over to God's care. Surrender your life to God. Surrender your will to God. Now, the deep mysticism says, if you keep doing that, pretty soon you're going to disappear. And God alone will remain. But you will experience it as the deepest part of your own being. You are not God, but you are none other. So in the end, God's not out there. In the last chapter, we worked so hard on this discrimination between the field and the knower of the field, the self and the non-self. Did you understand that journey that we took?
Yeah.
So I'm not the body, I'm not the feelings, I'm not the thoughts, and I'm not the ego sense, the sense of individuality. Who am I? Just pure being, pure consciousness. Just birthless and changeless and deathless. And what the deep mystics say, what God is, that's what you are. And then what's this world? It's not some horrible place where we suffer and stuff like that. In the end, the world is the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. That's what the Hebrew psalmist says. It's all gone. We have the same thing in the Chandogya Upanishad, one of my favorite mantras. Sarvam Kalvidam Brahma. All this is verily God. So the exoteric teachings are monotheistic in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The deep mysticism is monistic. What's the difference between monotheism and monism? Monotheism teaches there's only one God. Monism says there's only God. Subtle difference. Some people say, oh, is Vedanta pantheistic? Everything is God. No, it's not pantheistic, it's panentheistic. What's the difference between pantheism and panentheism? Pantheism is God's in everything. Panentheism is God's in everything, and God is completely beyond all that. Krishna says, in one small corner of my infinite being, it's so teeny tiny. He says that. The whole universe takes place. All right, well, I hope that's useful. All right, what verse are we on in the scripture?
We're on 5.
Okay, so again, our discussion here is to see the understanding of the 3 gunas: tamas, rajas, and sattva. Tamas, inactivity, dullness, illusion and delusion. Rajas, activity, and sattva, non-activity. Peace, stillness, clarity. All right, will you help us out, please, Deepa?
Sure. Sattvam rajastama iti guna prakriti sambhava nibadhanti mahabaho dehe dehinam avyayam. Purity, passion, and inertia, these qualities or gunas, O mighty armed, born of Prakriti, bind the indestructible, embodied one fast in the body.
So these gunas are modifications of Prakriti. So again, Gita is borrowing the language of Sankhya philosophy. Purusha, spirit, or pure consciousness. Prakriti, the stuff out of which nature is made. In the end, it's nothing but consciousness appearing as name and form. Mind stuff, energy. Lord Shiva is ever wedded to his Shakti energy. So these gunas, these great mind states, are modifications of Prakriti. So you know the gunas. Someone came in this evening and they were saying, oh, I'm all identified. And I asked a question. I didn't get much of an answer, but I asked, do you know this identification. So do you see that being identified is a mind state? It's not you. That's Thomas. Or if you have passion, oh, I really want this job, and oh, I'm trying to get into this school, or oh, I really want this girlfriend or this boyfriend. Rajas. But do you not know those feelings of activity and passion?
Is anger Rajas?
Anger is Rajas. The
What
definition.
about sadness? Is that Tamas?
Sadness is also Rajas. All our suffering is basically in Rajas. The yogic definition of anger is thwarted desire, unmet expectation. So when I have an attachment or an expectation and I don't get what I want, I get angry. Sadness is the loss of my object of desire. Don't believe me. Look to your direct experience. Are you sad? Anybody been sad? What were you sad about?
What did you say?
Oh, yeah, at some point in my life, I've been.
You know, someone died, you lost a good friend, you got dumped by a partner, you lost a job, you look at the horror of world events, current events. You're not getting what you want. You're sad. Not saying it's evil, saying that's its cause. What is anger? I have an expectation. I want it to be a certain way. I have an attachment, a desire. But I'm not getting what I want.
So they're the same root.
All of the stuff is the same root. Yes. So Thomas, you don't care. Let me give you a very clear example. So someone has a job that they don't particularly have any kind of relationship with. I was talking with a fellow this past week, and he's an executive assistant, and he's been spending maybe 2 hours out of the 8 hours he's paid working. The other 6 hours, he's been on his phone. It's disaffected. That's a tamasic mind state. They're shut down. Now, have you ever known anybody who's had a job like that? You know, there's the joke, you know how a government worker is like a broken rifle? It won't work and you can't fire it. And that's in every culture. But someone who may have a dream, I want to start my own bakery. They leave their job at the post office. They start their bakery. Guess what feelings start to happen then? Fear of failure, fear of success, competition, jealousy, envy, disappointment. Why? Because you care. Rajas. And then we may know people, even in the work situation, who have a degree of detachment. They can watch the apparent successes and failures rise and fall. They live a life of service. Attached at title or position. So our attachment or identification with these three gunas. These are what bind us. You can be bound by all of them. Now, very subtle question. These gunas mix their qualities. We're not ever just totally tamasic, unless you're sound asleep. Totally rajasic. Or the only time you're totally sattva is in samadhi. So you get mixed sattva, mixed rajas, mixed tamas. So the person who's identified or attached to tamas, their solution for everything in life is to go back to bed. Oh, I was talking with a person this past weekend. Oh, I've got this to do and I've got that to do. And oh, Jim, I'm just going to go back to bed. You ever been in that state?
Mhm.
Or know people in that state?
Yeah.
That's a tamasic mind. There are whole cultures that predominate tamas. Put it off tomorrow.
Jim, building on Divya's question, if anger and sadness are both coming from not having one's expectations met, then why do they feel so different?
Well, it's just how we choose to react to it. Sadness is when it's kind of turned inward. Anger is when it's turned outward.
Okay, but it's kind of the same thing.
Well, their root is the same thing, attachment and identification. The root of all our suffering is attachment and identification. But let me clarify more clearly. Anger is thwarted desire. It's the mind's reaction when I had an expectation it was going to be a certain way and I didn't get what I want. Sadness is about grieving. It's the loss of what I consider valuable. It's what I want. When I lose what I love, I'm sad. And who was it? Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who wrote her Stages of Grief. Anger's one of them. One of the stages. But when we care about stuff, when we're committed, then the mind is in the rajasic state. Now, in the sattvic state where it's mixed, there can be attachment. Oh, this horrible world, I'm just such a pain in the butt that I have to go to work. I just want to go home and meditate. Leave me alone, and you don't want to meditate. I just can't listen to the news, because I want to be peaceful. I have to avoid those people because they gossip. I want to be peaceful. Have you ever been in that state? Yes? No?
Yes.
So your mind is sattvic. You want to be clear. You want to be at peace. But there's still tinge with rajas and tamas. So we are bound by the free gunas. And listen carefully. Our minds cycle through them. Now, it's not just a circle. I think I've used either pizza or chocolate as an example. I want pizza, rajas. I finally get the pizza. Satisfied. Sattva. Then what? Then what happens? Chocolate ice cream starts all over again. But as we do our sadhana, our spiritual practice, it's not just a circle, it's a spiral. The mind becomes more and more sattvic. Now, I'm going to give you a practical tool. The tamasic mind cannot be moved directly into sattva. If you're in a mood where you're depressed and you're confused, you can't make decisions, you don't know what to do, you have things that you should be doing and you just want to zone out, do Netflix or get drunk or go back to bed, probably meditating isn't going to do you any good. Because you can't move the mind from tamas to sattva. Listen very carefully. We move the mind from tamas to rajas, then from rajas to sattva. So if you're in a tamasic state, try some retail therapy. Or clean out a drawer. Or straighten up a bookcase. Or just make your bed. Move into action. It's even okay if you've been terribly tamasic for it to be totally selfish action in the beginning. Then get a little more subtle. Try doing selfless action. Go serve someone else. I don't care what your goddamn problem is. Go help another person. Why? Because the most painful position of the mind is, how am I doing? Am I okay? What do they think of me? I love this phrase. We are the piece of shit that the whole world revolves around. A narcissist with low self-esteem. Does that sound familiar? So what do we need to do? Take that self-absorbed, self-obsessed attentive faculty, and no way you're going to be able to tune into the self. The mind's too gross. Turn it outward and serve the society. Take an interest in another person. Get out of your small self. It can be something as simple as you have a friend. I can call up Fang. Say, Fang, I feel like shit today. Tell me your problems. You forget yourself and listen to another person. Who's intuitively ever found that to be of value?
Mhm.
Yeah. Service. We call it in the tradition seva. Now, there's, the formal sense that you go to the ashram and you clean up the ashram, you do seva, you do the gardening, you fix food for the retreat and stuff like that. But that's just a very small window of your life. But the principle is, move the mind from tamas into rajas. Then start acting in the world, letting go of your attachment to the fruits of action, your identification with the sense of agency, in the spirit of service. And the mind will begin to move towards sattva, where effective meditation and self-inquiry can take place. Very important teaching. If we skip that if you try to meditate, all you're going to do is worry. Anybody done that one? Oh, yes, I sat for an hour today, Jim. I worried the entire hour. Better get up and do some physical work. More fruitful when the mind is tamasa. Now, things that will maximize sattva. Simply live purely. Ramana Maharshi was once asked, how do I attain a sattvic mind? You know what his answer was? Now, this was for that particular person at that particular time. Eat sattvic food. Why? Because in yoga, the body and the mind are not separate. Same thing. You eat a lot of heavy food, a lot of meat, a lot of grease, a lot of fried food. You're going to feel heavy. Your mind will be tamasic. This is why if you're a party person, you like to go out and get drunk, do drugs, go party. There's no morality in yoga, but that's tamasic behavior. Oh, I just want to have fun. No, what you want to do is get released from your rajas. Doing by covering the suffering. And it's always temporary. Do it till you don't have to do it anymore. Then come and engage in the spiritual. There is no state more painful than a head full of Vedanta and a heart full of desires. Because you know you're being an idiot, you still can't stop. Anybody been in that state? So here's a little bit of the basic teaching on how to use this understanding of the gunas in a way that's practical. So it is our attachment to these states that get us in trouble. Another way in which we can be attached to sattva. Oh, Jim, I had such a good meditation this week, but the whole rest of the week they were all terrible. And I just feel like a failure as a yogi. Who's gone through that one? Meaning you're attached and identified with sattva. The mind will do what it will do. Listen carefully. There is a term called kashaya in the tradition. Kashaya is the vomiting up of the unconscious. So what happens is these hridaya granthi, these knots of the heart, are in the unconscious. And when you're meditating, just don't do something, sit there. They come up out of the unconscious. And it's just there in front of you. The fear, the anger, the lust, the disappointment, the expectations, all that material. You don't do anything except hold it in compassionate awareness. And they start to dissolve. So paradoxically, those meditations where it seems like you're getting nothing, you're not very peaceful, it's just repeating your mantra and noisy, busy mind. Those may be the most useful. Anybody here done body work? Yes? No?
What is body work?
Like massage, like deep tissue massage. Ever had deep tissue massage?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So if you've got a knot in your leg and you go to the namby-pamby Swedish masseur, they go, you know, and you get nothing. But if you go to a good body worker, they say, oh, Jim, there's a knot there. You know that feeling? They say, breathe. Keep breathing, and they keep working on it till the knot's gone. And then they did not hurt us. The pain was there. They released the pain. Meditation is like deep tissue body work for your mind. Does this make sense?
Mhm.
So we'll go through periods. Sometimes it'll be a lot of peace. Sometimes it's just a struggle. But keep doing it. Don't be attached to the guna that shows up that day. In the second chapter, Krishna says, be you gunai, be you beyond the gunas, O Arjuna, and ever remain in the sattvic state. Seems like a contradiction. I am ever the witnessing consciousness. I watch the play of the gunas. I don't get involved with them. And I want happiness. Maximize the sattvic state. How do I maximize sattva? Abhyasa, vairagya. Practice of your meditation and mature renunciation of my attachments. Let go, let go, let go. All right. Kind of a little bit give you a preview of where we're going through all this. Any questions about any of this? It's really, really important teaching. Next verse.
Tatra sattvam nirmalatvat prakasha kamanamayam sukha sangena badhnati jnana sangena chanagha. Of these, sattva, which because of its stainlessness is luminous and healthy, it binds by creating attachment to happiness and attachment to knowledge, O sinless one.
So the attachments that we get reviewing in sattva. I'm attached to happiness. I'm attached to being peaceful. I need to make sure that I don't get around gross people. I can't be around people who don't agree with me philosophically. God forbid I have a job, oh no, I've got to stay home. Be peaceful, be happy. That can become an attachment. And that's not freedom. It's not freedom. The person with the liberated personality is free wherever they are, no matter who is around. This can get very subtle. I'm not speaking to so-and-so. Why? Because you get triggered by it. If you're in tamas, that may be an important thing to do. If you've got a lot of reactivity, there's the rajas going on. If you can only be peaceful by not being around them, that's an attachment. Ultimately, be in the presence of these people and not get identified. Where is it the hardest? Who can guess? Who are the hardest people for us to let go of?
The ones closest to us?
Family of origin. Why do my parents push my buttons? What's the answer? They installed them. Now, sometimes we do need to have a space away from it. And I'm not saying you need to move back in with your folks. For most yogis, that's probably not healthy. But you need to be able to go home. And they have the same absurd behavior. You just see it. Another little teaching. Takes two to fight. It takes one for there to be peace. You don't play the game. Any thoughts on this?
I've noticed, Jim, a lot of people nowadays, I've noticed a lot of people would be like, anytime there's an emotion that's other than happiness or friendliness, they don't want to talk about those topics. Like, I'm curious where that's coming from.
Well, I do think we need to be authentic. So the yogi needs to be absolutely honest with him or herself. This is the material that's there. Now, what's the appropriateness of sharing it with other people? I think Buddhism has a good paradigm. They're teaching on right speech. Are you familiar with it?
I think I heard it a long time ago.
Is it kind? Is it truthful? Is it necessary? Is it timely? Pretty good structure to look at in your conversations with people. And again, if you're around people and what they need to do is vent, fine, you listen. I don't believe it.
Do you think you can absorb those emotions though?
Well, that's again attachment to sattva. The beginning, maybe you need some distance, but in time, you can be around anybody. When you're empty, there's nothing to absorb. It just goes through. Now, practically speaking, you will find yourself having friends, social interactions with people who, by and large, will have a common mind state as you. You know, if you're a heavy drinker, one of the things you want to have around is people who drink more than you do, and you don't feel so bad. But I was talking with a young man, and he's kind of fallen for a guy. This young man's in recovery. And the fellow he's fallen for is a regular drug user. Now, it's not hard drugs. It's marijuana, it's psychedelics, it's ayahuasca. Oh, this is medicine, it's not drugs. My sense is it's probably not a smart idea for a long-term relationship, but he's got to work that out. You know, but you'll find that by and large, you'll attract what's around you. I have one student, and God bless him, every time it seems he gets out in public, at a store, on the bus, somebody wants to punch him out. He's doing better about not getting into it, at least. Now I get on the bus and people start wanting to talk about God. I'm not making this up. I'm making this up. So where you are, where your mind dwells, sends out energy. But by and large, I'm not sure as yogis it's helpful to live a defensive life. I'm going to protect my aura. That's attachment to something. Is that useful?
Yeah.
Now, you can set certain healthy limits if you're intuitively led to. There's a story, this is true. So back when I had my old job at the church job I had a wonderful boss, but his father used to tell or joke in a very cutting and demeaning way. Kept my mouth shut, none of my business, not my business. And in one particular, it was Christmas Eve, I think, I had a colleague, and she had worn an outfit where she had a lace blouse, and underneath it she had a tan colored shell. It was very, very elegant. So my boss's father said, "Oh, you're coming to church in your underwear, huh?" And I turned to him. This is my boss's father. My intuition. I said, "Cliff, I don't find cruelty funny, so I'm going to leave the room now." It's just dead silence. Sometimes, and his son, my boss, said, "You're not afraid." He was so happy. And that fellow never used cruel humor around me again. Very interesting point. So sometimes we do say things. But what we want to know inside is, are you defensive? Are you protecting? Stuff like that. Is that useful?
Yeah.
So the point of the verse is the prior one, we're bound by our attachment to the gunas. And he started with sattva, those who are attached to happiness, to conducive environments. So everything is sweet and light. People have to have it that way. Their attachment is to the predominance of sattva. All right, next verse. Are you there, Deepa?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Now I can. Next verse.
Okay. Rajo ragatmakam vidhi trishna sangas mudbhavam tanni badnati kaunteya karma sangena dehinam. Know thou rajas to be of the nature of passion, the source of thirst and attachment. It binds fast, O Kaunteya, the embodied one, by attachment to action.
Yes, so rajas is of the nature of passion. I must have it this way. I can't have it that way. I'll be happy when it'll be better if more, better, different. When the mind is under the throes of rajas, The effect is what we call kartavya. Kartavya is obligatory action, work, struggle. I have to get from point A to point B in order for it or me to be okay. This is the phenomenon, this is the quality of those who are attached to rajas. And again, whole cultures can be rajasic. The US is predominantly a rajasic culture. Go to a cocktail party, you know, what do you do? What's your title? People say, oh, yes, I would have vacation in Switzerland when skiing this winter. Oh, yes, I've finally got a bigger boat. I have a 62-foot sailboat now. You know, you've been around people like this. You may be a person like this. One with the most toys wins. That's rajas. And it binds people by the strong ropes of attachment. So ambition is lauded in this culture. Success is lauded in this culture. We look to the captains of industry. They are the ones. The Jeff Bezos, the Zuckerbergs, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Vladimir Putin, Donald Trump. We hold these people up as, oh, they must be very happy because they've got so much stuff. Those are the people bound by rajas. Next one.
Jim, are there examples of tamasic cultures?
Of tamasic cultures? Well, I don't want to be xenophobic, but there are certainly elements of every culture. So, for example, usually wherever you find government bureaucracy, you find tamas. I can remember in India where unemployment was like 30–40% in some parts of India. And the men would get up in the morning and they'd go to the tea stall and get drunk all day. I don't know if that still goes on. But yes, there are cultures that are tamasic. There are places in Latin America where you find a lot of that. You find tamas in cultures that are beaten down, when there's been oppression. I heard a woman talking the other day, and again, she was an alcoholic. She says, of course I'm an alcoholic, I'm Russian. You know, it's just how everybody does there. They all drink vodka. But why? Because, you know, life is not as happy for a lot of people. So again, I don't want to label a culture. That's just not my way. But I think you can get the sense that there are elements in culture, in every culture, where we have that.
Right. That makes sense.
Jim, in my judgment, which could be completely wrong, but I think that in India, there is a funny mixture of sattva and tamas. So the cultural context venerates sattva, but but in practice, what is happening oftentimes is actually tamas. So instead of rajas, everybody likes to say how rajas is bad, but instead of moving to sattva, they're talking of sattva, but actually it's tamas. That's at least what I feel.
Well, and again, you can say that because you're an Indian in India. I'm a white guy in America. I'm not going to say that.
Yeah, sure. I'm just saying
But no,
this is
no,
my.
and I get it. And there are elements of Indian culture that have become quite rajasic. There
Yeah,
are booming IT sections.
yeah, I think that's very
Lo-
positive. A lot
Yes,
of,
yeah.
yeah,
And what's it doing? It's moving those tamasic elements into rajas.
yeah,
But I think in some ways, some of the effects of British colonialism was to suppress, depress many dimensions of Indian society.
yeah, definitely. I mean, we've had a difficult history, but I still think that we should get out of it sooner than we have.
And there are lots of sadhus who run around with the orange cloth and they're on the bridge smoking dope.
Yeah,
That's not sattva.
yeah,
All right. So you can say that, but I cannot.
yeah, sure.
I don't want to it would be I would feel inappropriate saying it.
Sure.
I can talk about the American Post Office. Which, by the way, most of whom are highly dedicated people. All right, next verse. Getting into Thomas now.
Tamasatva jnanajam vidhi mohanam. Sorry. Tamasatva jnanajam vidhi mohanam sarvadehinam pramadalasya nidrabhi asti nibadnati bharata. But no doubt tamas is born of ignorance, deluding all embodied beings. It binds fast, O Bharata, by heedlessness, indolence, and sleep.
Yes. And the third is, many of us deal with the suffering of rajas by tamas. Now, you don't see it in American movies much anymore, but in the old-timey days, if you were watching a police drama, so the cop on the beat, there was a shootout, he's all upset, so he goes into his lieutenant's office, and what does the lieutenant do? He opens his bottom drawer, pulls out a bottle of whiskey, takes a glass and pours the poor cop a drink. You remember seeing that? It was a pretty common thing. My dad, every day when he came home from work, he would have 2 martinis. He liked them very dry. So he would pour the vodka in the glass and he'd go, vermouth. But what is that response? I am afflicted by the suffering of rajas and I want relief. So what do? I self-soothe. I move the mind from rajas to tamas. And we have all sorts of ways of justifying. Oh, I just want a little escape, Jim. oh, I want release. Now, I just want to feel good for a while. No blame. But it never solves the problem. Because if your problem is you don't have enough money to pay your bills, or you've got a crappy boss at work, or you're fighting with your partner, and you decide, I'm just going to get drunk, what happens when you wake up the next day? You still have the same problems. So moving the mind from rajas to tamas, in the end, at best, gives us a little respite from the suffering, but it never solves the problem. Never solves the problem.
But sometimes you can solve a problem better, right? After you do have time away. Like if you go to sleep and you wake up the next day, you sometimes have more clarity.
Yeah. But that's not dulling your mind by booze or something like that. Or smoking, really good dope. Or shooting heroin. Might as well shoot heroin and get the good stuff, But it's the direction that the mind takes. Many people self-soothe. And what that means is I deal with my discomfort by finding something that soothes me. Whereas if you've had a tough day at the office, you might get more value saying, honey, I'm just going to take 20 minutes and I'm going to sit in meditation. Or any of you ever do any journaling?
Yeah.
That's a very good way to get stuff from out of your ears onto a piece of paper. That's moving the mind more from rajas towards sattva. Or it can be something so simple if you've got a partner or a husband. Or you can offer this. How was your day today? Any of you done that with a partner? Yeah. And you listen. And then their ability, or if you've done it, if you need to share, you get it out. But you don't go unconscious. Lots and lots of tools. But as a rule of thumb, be very watchful if your way of dealing with your suffering is moving the mind from rajas towards tamas. Again, this is not a moral issue. It just doesn't work. It's at best temporary, and frequently, if you medicate a problem, it just makes it worse. All right. Let's do one more. You need to dash. It's about 2 minutes of 8.
Yeah, I'm gonna dash a little bit.
Sattvam sukhe samjayati raja karmani bharata jnana mavritya tuktamah pramade samjayatyuta. Sattva attaches to happiness, rajas to action, O Bharata, while tamas, verily shrouding knowledge, attaches to heedlessness.
Yes. So he sums up here this teaching of the bondage of the 3 gunas. So those whose Bondage is attachment to sattva, when everything's nice. Rajas, my attachments to action, ambition, getting what I want. Tamas, my attachment is to going unconscious. It's seeing that. And again, what we want to do is let the play of lagoons play. Be beyond lagoons, as he said in the second chapter. Just watch.
Jim, I have a question about this.
Please.
So this idea of watching the gunas play and being a witness, in this, does one take responsibility for, the thoughts that one has? My worry is that, like I might be entertaining sort of unhealthy thoughts and notions and not taking responsibility for them by saying that, they don't belong to me. I'm just the witness.
But what you will find at an earlier stage of our practice, the methodology is we remove negative sanskaras with positive sanskaras. So for example, you can look at the yamas and niyamas, which are moral precepts, ethical precepts. They're very good ways to deal with counteracting negative thoughts with positive thoughts. But a practice beyond that is to get out of the mind. Swamiji used to say the way to heal the mind is to get out of the mind. Don't believe your thoughts. And again, if negative thoughts arise, you say, you're not real. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. That was such a rotten person. How could they have said it? Stop it. That's not real. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. Or I think I'm gonna work in a food line at the temple tonight and serve food to people. Whatever you are. But I'm not saying you don't take action.
I
But
see, yeah.
the idea is don't believe your mind. The way to heal the mind is to get out.
I find that what ends up happening with me is that, let's say some such thoughts arise, then I feel very guilty about them. And then, this cycle kind of keeps continuing.
Yeah. That doesn't do any good. Guilt is not an effective tool, ever. First of all, in the end, you're not really responsible. The negative thought was fed to you, probably from your parents. Where did they get it? From their parents. If you have a negative thought, it's a habit. That's all it is. It doesn't have a personality. Now, your actions, that's a little bit different. If you do negative actions, if you hurt or harm someone,
Yeah, no, it's not that.
Yeah, but don't believe the thought. You want to have this samadrishta. That doesn't mean you follow the train of thinking. You're angry at a coworker. I don't want you to spend the whole morning figuring out how you're going to hang him from, the rafters, or plotting ways to assassinate. That's counterproductive. But if the thought arises, you just see it. Okay. There's never, ever any benefit in feeling guilty about your thoughts. That just adds another layer. Just another layer. Did that make sense, Shweta?
Yes, Jim, it does. I get it. maybe, do you mind discussing this a little bit more? If we're out of time, maybe I can bring it
Well,
up
we're
later.
out of time, but I can stay online.
Okay.
Let's end and let people go who wish, and then we'll stay online and talk. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadhaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. Om Tat Sat. Now, Deepa, can you make me host and then just stop the recording?
Yes, happy to do it.